Good evening, everyone. My name is Shakiba Shayani. I'm the President and CEO of the Guelph Chamber of Commerce, and I will be the moderator for this evening. As a leading voice of business, the Guelph Chamber is pleased to be hosting the debate this evening. I'd like to welcome everyone, and I would like to thank the Guelph and District Association of Realtors for co-hosting this debate with us tonight. But before we begin the formal program, I am going to review the format that we will be using this evening. The position and order in which all candidates are seated, and the position and order in which candidates will speak tonight were determined by a draw prior to the program. Candidates will be introduced in the order in which they drew. First, each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for opening remarks. The debate questions have come from members of the Guelph Chamber and members of the audience. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer every question asked by the moderator. Candidates, you will have 1 minute to answer the question, and you will be able to monitor your time on the screen in front of you. Please note that in the interest of time, each candidate may be cut off after their allotted time has passed. The order of questions are answered and will be determined by the moderator on a rotating basis. Candidates, you will have the opportunity for a rebuttal if you or your party have been directly named by another candidate. In addition, there are some rebuttal rules to follow. Rebuttals will not be allowed based on comments made during opening or closing remarks. Requests for a rebuttal will be signaled to the moderator by placing your rebuttal card on the table in front of you. Please note there are no rebuttals to rebuttals. And the decision of the moderator will be final. The opportunity for a rebuttal is limited to 1 minute. Lastly, each candidate will be given the opportunity for a closing statement. The candidate's order will be in reverse from their introductions, and closing statements will be limited to 1.5 minutes. So that we can get through as many questions as possible, we ask the candidates to please be respectful of the time and, of course, to one another. I would like to remind everyone in the audience also about the rules of decorum. Please no clapping, cheering, or jeering throughout the debate. I would now like to introduce the candidates in the order in which they drew. First, Aisha Jahangir. Second, Mark Peralvis. Third, Steve Dick. Fourth, Lloyd Longfield. And fifth, Ashish Sitchin. Good evening. I will begin with you, Aisha, and your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We are here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Thank you to the Indigenous people who have resisted colonialism in order to make it possible to understand this message. I want to start off by saying that I'm disappointed that today's debate falls on the Jewish Day of Atonement. Doing so excludes many from the conversations we will be having today. I'm running for the NDP this federal election because I stand for social justice, and I want to give a voice to concerns raised by Guelph community members. I'm a registered nurse and have served the city of Guelph for over 20 years. I'm currently working as a registered mental health nurse at Hamilton Wentworth Detention Centre. Through my practice and time spent as a union leader with the Ontario Nurses Association, I learned that a lot of work is still needed to ensure that the voices of healthcare providers and concerned citizens are at the various tables of government. Funding cuts to healthcare and education result in degradation of the essential services and social programs. Many people are already struggling. The cuts to services we have seen at the provincial level and the patchwork investment in essential programs at the federal level are at the root of financially, mentally, and socially struggling citizens in Guelph and across our country. My meetings with voters across the city show citywide struggles with affordability of housing, medication, transportation, and education, among others. Governments have a responsibility to protect the interests of their people, not just for the wealthy and the well-connected. The power to create and pass legislation must put hardworking Canadians, families, and seniors at the center of their decision-making, not big pharma, big oil, or Bay Street billionaires. People are legitimately concerned about global warming and the catastrophic effects of inaction. Governments must end fossil fuel subsidies and assist workers in the transition to clean energy. The NDP will do exactly that. We will end $3.3 billion in fossil fuel subsidies and reinvest that money to create 300,000 new clean technology jobs. This is the forward-thinking, inclusive, and compassionate thing to do. I have met seniors and young families expressing concern with the rising cost of living. Some young couples have even opted not to have children because they cannot afford it. It's unacceptable that Guelphites working full-time jobs or multiple jobs are struggling to make ends meet. It's in fact shameful. We need a government that addresses the lack of affordability head-on. An NDP government is committing to building 500,000 affordable housing units to ensure people can afford a place called home. It is the government's responsibility to address the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Mark?
Thank you. My name is Mark Peralvis, and that rhymes with for all of us. And I'm the People's Party candidate for this riding. Thank you for the invitation, the Guelph Wellington Real Estate Board, and thank you, Shakiba, for moderating. I appreciate it, and the Guelph Chamber for hosting this debate. Thank you. As this is being hosted by the Real Estate Board, I thought we should talk about housing and how that factors into the current issues that we're dealing with in our country. Right now, 25-year-olds can't buy into this market. The houses are too expensive, and the reason is fairly straightforward. It's supply and demand. We have rampant speculation in our market with a lot of apartments and homes sitting empty. This is particularly noticeable in Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, but it's leaking into the other large markets around those areas. We have builders who can produce 37,000 units, but that's 1/3 not enough for the demand. Demand would be 50,000 units. Those are 2018 numbers. We have a federal government that ignores the real difficulties that are encountered by the municipalities with regards to infrastructure, housing in this circumstance, but a whole bunch of infrastructure is being ignored. Capacity on roadways, hospitals, etc. And their plan, the Liberals' plan and the Conservatives' plan, is to increase the number of people entering this market. We've already shown that overwhelming municipalities, we can see it with our eyes. The traffic is awful. We have hallway healthcare and no housing, homeless people who are immigrants and refugees. This is incredibly inappropriate in Canada. The People's Party of Canada is the only party promising to address the root cause of this. We will reduce the number of immigrants coming into the market and balance the demand to make sure that housing is affordable for everyone. People who should be able to afford a house at 25 with a good job just can't buy into this market. Money laundering is playing a role in this as well, increasing the price of Canadian real estate by about $40 billion in 2018. The RCMP lacked the resources to effectively fight this crime. This artificially inflates an already pressured market. We will give more support to the RCMP and border service agents to crack down on the money laundering, because money laundering is a very complex crime, and without the resources to fight it, it will continue. And we will increase the speed at which the current claims from people who have illegally crossed our border in the last few years are being processed, thereby reducing costs and eliminating the backlog. I have 37 seconds. Okay. The People's Party of Canada will also stop the practice of giving corporate welfare. The government shouldn't be giving millions of dollars of taxpayer monies to Loblaws for fridges and Bombardier for failing to deliver their contracts on time. The People's Party of Canada would also keep Canadian tax dollars within our economy and not send hundreds of million dollars to the Asia Infrastructure Bank or send billions to Africa. We would prioritize balancing our books and incentivizing jobs in this country to make sure that skilled jobs and Canadians are benefiting from those monies within our economy. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mark. Steve?
Good evening. It's so nice to be here with you for this discussion. I'm Steve Dick, and I'm running to be your voice in Ottawa. It's safe to say that the Green Party has always been the trusted voice for decisive action on climate. So trusted that routinely the Liberals take our plan. But the problem is when they copy our plans and policies, they water them down. The Liberals promised they would end fossil fuel subsidies. Well, the International Monetary Fund just released a new report. Any idea how much the Liberal government has been giving the fossil fuel industry? $60 billion in 1 year. Just think what we could do with $60 billion into healthcare, into education, into infrastructure, instead of into oil and gas. It's madness, and the Liberals' own people are saying it. The formal The former Liberal Environment Minister, David Anderson, said the Trans Mountain Pipeline is a bad idea. Why? Because he understands that no Asian country wants the hassles or the cost of Alberta bitumen. It's time to transition to a low-carbon economy and completely re-energize this nation so Canadian businesses and our workers can have well-paying jobs. And this is my life story. I'm a living embodiment of someone transformed from the fossil fuel economy to the clean tech economy. 10 years ago, I was building gasoline engines for Cadillacs. Today, the company I founded installs solar equipment that will keep millions of dollars in our community, creating great jobs and prosperity for Guelph. For the last 10 years, I've taken leadership on cross-party policy building on electoral reform and climate action across municipal, provincial, federal governments and engaging young people and seniors. Greens are also devoted to building a healthy and inclusive social environment, one that puts healthcare and affordable housing and social justice at the very core of our mission. Greens understand that when we take care of the climate, we take care of each other and ourselves. I look forward to demonstrating how solid the Green platform is during tonight's debate, and how good for business it is, how good for people it is, and how good for the planet it is, and how I'm ready to be your voice in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd.
Thank you, and thanks to the Chamber and to the Guelph and District Association of Realtors for putting this on tonight. The Chamber has always been a nonpartisan voice of not only the business but the community, and it's great to have you taking time out of your not-for-profit schedule to dedicate to democracy in Guelph, and for us to be here. And thanks to Aisha for the land acknowledgement at the beginning, because that is where it began. But also, this is where democracy happens in Guelph. Sitting around this ring here is where debates happen, what the community will look like in the future. So I feel privileged to be sitting in June Hoffland's seat tonight. And I know that working with the municipality, the federal government, provincial government is really important. And it's important that we all get along and create what we need to do together to move us forward as a community. I'm really proud of the last 4 years. Coming into politics from the Chamber of Commerce and joining the Liberal Party in order to run to serve our community as an elected member was something that was new to me. But working with the Chamber, I was working with politicians a lot, and I was trying to find solutions for our community, trying to create a prosperous economy. And in the last 4 years, with the help of the federal government, Canada's created over 1 million jobs. We have the lowest unemployment in 40 years. Guelph has the lowest unemployment in Canada on a regular basis. And that provides a challenge. Where do we find the workers? How do we improve immigration? How do we get access to talent from around the world? How do we get them to Guelph? And working with the realtors and the home builders and the developers, how do we get living spaces created in Guelph? Working with the municipality on that type of strategy for our official plan. Looking at what kind of society are we creating? How are we making sure marginalized people are being looked after, whether it's addictions and mental health challenges that people are facing in the downtown and downtowns across Canada, or whether it's new Canadians coming and trying to find schools and doctors, and how do we provide the doctors? So the plan that the Liberal Party has going forward is to make sure that everybody in Canada has access to a doctor, has access to mental health services, has a way to get into their house, into the housing market. And the environmental plan, we're the first government, the first federal government to have an environmental plan that has been actioned and that is moving forward, a 50-point plan. A lot of money going into it, a lot of effort going into it, and working with municipalities where Guelph has a community energy plan that looks a lot like the federal pan-Canadian network or plan on climate change, looking at where are the largest emitters and how do we attack them together.
Thank you, Lloyd. Ashish.
I want to take a moment to thank the Guelph Chamber of Commerce and Guelph and District Association of Realtors for organizing this event. Also, thank you all who are here tonight. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today. I'm a first-generation immigrant, a scientist, a husband, and a father, and a proud Canadian. I give thanks to all who have cared for this land, beginning with our Indigenous peoples. It speaks volumes about a country that it can allow a first-generation immigrant to run as a member of parliament. It took 20 years of dreams and another 10 years of legal process for me to become a Canadian citizen. I'm immensely privileged to call myself a Canadian and to be a part of its rich traditions and culture. I owe a lot back to this great country. We must ensure that we stand up for our country so that it is economically strong and lives within its means, and trust in our institutions is maintained, and we have a strong international standing, that our Prime Minister is respected, and we take care of our seniors and our veterans. This election, we have a choice to make. What kind of a country do we want? I'm asking you, everyone in this family we call Guelph, do we want a country that lives within its means, or a country whose irresponsible spending and debt will be left to be paid by our children and our grandchildren? Do we want a country that takes leadership role on climate change locally, nationally, globally, or a country that thinks we can carbon tax our way out of responsible environmental stewardship? Do we want a country whose Prime Minister is an international embarrassment, or we want a Prime Minister that leads our country with strength, integrity, and maturity on the international stage? It's time for us to make a correction. About the carbon tax, it makes everything more expensive for Canadians. We need green technology, not taxes. I'm saying this as a toxicologist. I work for a clean technology company that is driving innovation. Instead of liberal tax scheme, our conservative plan for the environment enables Canadians to take direct action and helps to make everyday living more affordable. It's time for a change, and Guelph needs a member of parliament, a conservative member of parliament, for strong national representation. I wish to be that member of parliament who will listen to you, represent you with honesty, and will be always available for you. Let's win this thing together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. We'll jump into our questions, candidates, and we'll start with Aisha, but all of you will answer in order. First question. What steps will your government take to renew Canada's outdated tax system to ensure we continue to create jobs, attract investment, and remain competitive? Aisha, you may begin.
Our priority is to ensure that we protect workers' rights, all workers' rights, protect our environment, and protect the goods, public goods. So it's important that we are fiscally responsible. However, those can never be neglected. Those are necessities. And we will ensure that we maintain to continue to be fiscally responsible by doing so.
Mark. Oh, we have too many mics on at the back. Thank you.
Aha, there we go. A People's Party government. We'll get rid of the deficit in 2 years through spending cuts and fiscal prudence. Spending cuts will include corporate welfare, foreign development aid, I've got estimates, but it doesn't matter, CBC, equalization payments, and funding for programs which are provincial or municipal responsibilities. We'll stop using our tax system for political ends and make it simpler and fairer. In particular, we will eliminate targeted tax measures that are inefficient and serve no compelling public policy purpose. We'll cut personal income taxes after the deficit has been eliminated over the course of several budgets, as the fiscal room is found to allow it. The objective will be to lower taxes for all Canadians by raising the basic personal exemption to $15,000 from $12,069 in 2019, and reducing the number of tax brackets from 5 to 2, with incomes from $15,000 to $100,000 taxed at 15%, and anything over $100,000 at 25%. And over the course of one mandate, we will abolish the personal capital gains tax by decreasing the inclusion rate from 50 to 0.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Steve?
As a business owner, I've always wanted to make sure that taxes are used efficiently. I like paying my taxes. They do good things in our economy. Canada is long overdue for a tax review. It was back in the 60s that our taxation system was fully reviewed, and it's become uncompetitive, cumbersome, and inefficient. We want to establish an arm's length tax commission to analyze the tax system for fairness and accessibility and base it on a progressive taxation system. We need to close tax loopholes. In the Parliamentary Budget Office report that came out in July, there was, we were supposed to have a tax rate of around 27% if you include the federal and provincial rates. And we see that if you look at the 30 largest companies on the TSX, we're only collecting about 16%, so that the effective tax rate is much less. We need to end. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd?
A minute goes by quickly. And this is a question that Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been advocating for decades now, because it's been since the 70s since we've had a review of Canada's tax system, the Tax Act. When we look at how much work needs to go into that, I think that's something that I've said in my term in Parliament that would be a great project for the Senate. Because the Senate is there through different political cycles, and we have expertise in the Senate, and the Senate is now operating independently, so that the expertise that's in the Senate from across the country could work across the country, looking at provincial standards and federal standards. I mean, what we've done in terms of tax rate has helped small business. We've gone from 11% to 9%, but what we do in terms of complexity is we keep adding. We need to bring that all back together and see how we can make it simpler for business.
Thank you, Lloyd. Ashish?
Yeah, our party's whole platform is based on...
Oh, is your mic on? Thank you.
Our party's whole platform is based on affordability. And our leader, Andrew Scheer, I think if you're following him, he keeps coming with all the wonderful ideas on how we can put money back into Canadians' pockets. And we have universal tax cut, and I think a slogan that really basically focuses very well on what we are trying to do with more money in the pocket is that it's time for Canadians to get ahead, not just get by. And the taxes which are being lowered are not going to only affect the people who want to buy homes, but also elderly and the senior citizens and small businesses in particular. Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. On to our next question. Tomorrow is World Mental Health Day. What role do you think the federal government should play in addressing the mental health crisis in our communities? And we'll be starting with Mark. Sorry. Gentlemen,
There we
turn off
go.
your mics. Thank you.
Thank you. I spent 15 years working in children's mental health, and I was in the education system when Kathleen Wynne was renegotiating our contracts. They unilaterally took away our sick time, and that was provincial Liberals, but I experienced that. So my opinion with regard to healthcare is that healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, and every system, education, healthcare, et cetera, or hospitals, et cetera, needs more money. So what my government plans to do is give the GST to the provinces and give them the power to tax. That gives you, the electorate, the ability to hold your provincial politicians accountable for the services they have to deliver. And if you want more money in mental health, then you can demand that and say, and tell your provincial government, and then hold them accountable at the ballot box. So giving the provinces the same amount they're getting now with no conditions, and the accountability for the electorate.
Thank you, Mark. Steve?
Greens always talk about illness prevention. Investing in mental health care is an illness prevention step. It's absolutely the case that we need to invest more in mental health care. Here in Guelph, we've got a 24/7 helpline. We can get people scheduled in, but there is no wait time requirement. People wait way too long. They end up trying to treat themselves with, different ways. And it's really important that we're getting people real help, and we're responding to their needs to make sure that people are able to have treatments that work for them and in their family. The Greens will bring forward a national mental health strategy to make sure our First Nations people are getting the health care or mental health care treatments they need also.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd.
Thanks for this important question. This is my biggest file. When I was first elected to Parliament, we advocated within our caucus to have funding carved out specifically for mental health for provinces and territories. We were able to get $5 billion put into mental health budgets. But it isn't enough. We are looking in our platform going forward to include mental health in the Canada Health Act, so that mental health will be treated as any other health in Canada, setting clear national standards that the provinces and territories have to provide for access to mental health services, to make sure that people in communities get the help they need when they need it, and to continue to make home care and palliative care priorities with national standards according to the Canada Health Act.
Thank you, Lloyd. Ashish.
Yep, Conservative Party takes mental health crisis very seriously. Our last Conservative government under the Prime Minister Harper invested heavily, millions of dollars in this regard. And I know people personally who have been suffering from mental health issues. And so as a toxicologist, I understand a lot about mental health. And so our party takes it really seriously. And I feel if the person suffering on it's not just a person who suffers from mental health, it's a family and the friends surrounding also get affected. So we have to make sure that the person suffering is provided every support possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. Next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Aisha. Thank you.
What the government could do is actually make a commitment to adequately fund mental health services. And one way the NDP is going to be addressing this is we're going to be decriminalizing opioids, and we're going to be ending the stigma that's associated with mental health. Mental health must be treated as a health issue, as a social issue, and we need to stop criminalizing people. People shouldn't be in jail. They should be in rehab. They should be in hospital beds. They should be receiving the care that they need so that they can start their journey in recovery. I am passionate about mental health and addiction services because working in the field that I do, I recognize that people are not getting what they need, and we need more funding.
Thank you, Aisha. Next question. How would you increase housing supply and make it easier for an average Canadian to purchase a home? And we'll be starting with Steve.
There's a couple things we do know. We know that the cost of housing in Guelph has gone up 30% in the last 4 years. We also know that our incomes haven't gone up 30% in the last 4 years, and the mortgage and lending rules have gotten tighter. So what do we need to do to address this? We need to invest in the brownfield cleanup here in Imico. That land has been sitting there for too long without having houses built on it, and we need to make sure we have affordable, inclusive housing included there. We also need to make sure that there's access for new home buyers. I would like to see us move towards a 30-year amortization for new home buyers, not for speculators. We need to address the speculation that's happening in our housing market. It's actually driving housing to be unaffordable. We need empty houses. Housing needs to be about homes, not about profit.
Thank you. Lloyd.
There. The federal government has returned into housing policy management with the Place to Call Home strategy, which is Canada's first housing strategy in over 40 years. It's a 10-year, $55 billion plan, and it's something that needs to be localized. And by that I mean housing in Toronto is going to be different than housing in Guelph or housing in Vancouver. So what we've done locally is providing $1.4 million to the county to help determine where the priority areas are so that then as a federal government, we know how we can line up with local priorities. And what's happened in the last year is we've reduced chronic homelessness in Guelph and Wellington County by 24% by working together. So it's significant when we work together. We need to work with the municipality, and we also have to have a provincial partner at the table, which is a problem.
Thank you, Lloyd. Ashish.
Okay. All right. So we do believe that the housing market should be consumer and market-driven, and we need to fix the stress test for first-time home buyers and also remove the stress test for the people who are trying to refinance. And as far as amortization is concerned, the Conservative Party does want a 30-year amortization rate so that it becomes more affordable for first-time home buyers. Also, the Conservative Party believes that we should make the federal land available so that the housing supply can be increased, so that we have a demand and supply balanced and the prices of homes can be brought down so that more people can afford it. That's it.
Thank you, Ashish. Aisha.
There are virtually no affordable housing available here in Guelph. And people are moving out of Guelph because they can't afford to live here anymore. That's what I've been hearing at the doors. And you know what? The Liberal government, I appreciate their support. However, the $1.4 million invested into some kind of inquiry to find out where the affordable housing is required is not enough. What we need is affordable housing, not some plan or investment towards a plan. That being said, the NDP has a strategy to build 500,000 new units. And this is, we need to increase our our supply, because we have a demand and supply issue. We're also going to be increasing our mortgage amortization to 30 years, and we're going to be doubling the rebate for first-time home buyers. That is our commitment, because our commitment is to ensure that people have affordable housing that is adequate and safe. That being said, housing is a right, and we're committed to that.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So the PPC does not have on its book any plans to change the existing current programs, such as the first-time home buyer tax credit or reintroduction of the 30-year amortization for first-time home buyers, or the stress test that came into effect in January 2018. Those policies don't address the root of the problem. They just kick the can down the road. They burden people with debt longer, and if interest rates rise, which they inevitably will, the cost to carry those mortgages will increase substantially. Our plan is a plan to reduce the pressure, bring in a reduced number of immigrants overall, but a higher ratio of immigrants who are connected with jobs, economic immigrants. And this will encourage a more even distribution and less people ending up in the same cities, because that's what happens most of the time they move to Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal. And thereby, over time, it will decrease the cost of getting into the houses and increase the supply.
Thank you, Mark. 1 minute rebuttal, Lloyd.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Aisha for bringing up some of the local strategy, and the discussion that we've been having is implementing solutions. And we have 4 solutions in Guelph that we've been working on. One that's completed, phase 1, is the Habitat City View build, the Welcome Inn Center to put some housing on top of the Welcome Inn downtown, the St. Joe's Center, looking at housing for seniors that's affordable, and then IMICO, as was mentioned, but the cleanup is a provincial issue, and so that's one of the difficulties that we have when we're trying to do these projects. But when we look at getting all the ends tied together, I've been working with the Guelph District Association of Realtors, and they've said to me that it's the middle range of houses that's causing the problem. If we had more seniors housing, people could move from middle range houses to seniors, which then starts the continuum of housing moving, so that it isn't necessarily starting with affordable, but affordable would be part of the continuum.
Thank you, Lloyd. Seeing no other rebuttals, next question. What are your strategies to ensure Canada's natural resource, agriculture, and agri-food sectors can meet the increasing global demand for Canadian products? Starting with Lloyd.
Thank you. This is such a Guelph question. It's a perfect place to have this question in this discussion because of the University of Guelph being Canada's food university. And sitting on the Agriculture Committee, it's always 1-800 University of Guelph when we need witnesses. When it comes to doing the research that's needed in order to feed a growing planet, we use the University of Guelph researchers as some of our key witnesses and studies going forward. And then the research money, in which the University of Guelph has been funded over $170 million in research overall, including food, since I was elected. So getting money into science to have data so that we can have scientific solutions to the food crisis, to have Canada's first food policy that we developed while I sat on the Ag Committee. And then moving forward as a community to show what we're learning here in Guelph that can be applied in other communities across Canada and, in fact, around the world.
Thank you, Lloyd, and I'll ask you to grab that rebuttal card off your table. Thank you. Ashish.
Okay, natural resources have brought untold wealth to this country and prosperity to Canada. I think the Conservative Party is committed to develop natural resources in our country. And we are having a lot of hurdles in the development of natural resources, and that's why our party is also committed that we will remove carbon tax, which we feel will propel the economy in a faster way. And as far as agriculture is concerned, I chose Guelph because of the agriculture university here. I was in the agriculture university for 13 years. So personally, as well as from the perspective of the party, I think we do need to develop these sectors so that for the overall prosperity of Canada, and we have to make sure that all the hurdles in their way must be removed, like carbon tax and other taxes. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. Aisha.
It's important to recognize that when we have a climate crisis or global warming at hand, it does affect our food security and agriculture. So we would want to support our farmers and food, and we would also want to make sure that we're lowering the cost of internet and cell phones so that we can assist them in that fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Mark.
Hello. This is a bit of a complicated question. We're talking about food systems and natural resources and making sure that there's an increasing, and making sure that there's supply for an increasing demand of Canadian products. And well, that leads naturally into supply management. So we want to create a free, open, and fair system that will save Canadians billions of dollars thanks to the lower prices they will pay for these products once we unwind supply management and open it up to free market in a responsible way and over a period of time. There was a model, New Zealand and Australia both did it in the early 2000s successfully. We would phase out the system over a number of years and allow Canada's area and eggs and poultry farmers to thrive and selling their products internationally. So an increased demand means more products sold, means more money in farmers' pockets. Additionally, we spend $300 million a month on Saudi oil. A People's Party government would build pipelines and keep those jobs and that money in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Steve.
We would set a target of reducing the amount of food imported into Canada by 1/3. This is a $15 billion opportunity for Canada. One of the ways we're going to focus on increasing our local food production is through a food in school, a healthy food in school programs. It's so important that our young people have access to healthy food. Our soils in Canada have been losing carbon, and we need to reverse that direction. The University of Guelph is making groundbreaking studies about regenerative agriculture, the process of actually taking carbon dioxide out of the air and having it gathered underground to reverse the destruction that's been happening in our soils while addressing climate change. As we do this, we improve the soil structure so that our soils are more capable of receiving water. We're expecting more rain to happen all at once. We need our soils ready and our natural resources ready to receive what's coming in the future.
Thank you. Next question. How does your economic development strategy address the needs of Canada's rural regions? And we're starting with Ashish.
Yeah, I think the Conservative Party has put forward a plan where we will take rural communities into consideration in whatever legislations and the decisions we make. And rural communities have played a vital role in our economic development, and we will take into consideration their personal concerns and their unique needs in proposing any new legislations in the Parliament. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. Aisha.
It's important to support rural communities, and we would do that by ensuring that they have the technology that's needed so that they can continue providing those resources and yeah, I mean, the NDP is committed to support all people. So recognizing that with the rise of cost of living and our climate crisis, people are in trouble, and so are our farmers. So we want to support them the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
The carbon tax is ineffectual. It doesn't actually reduce emissions at all. And it hurts farmers. It hurts the poorest Canadians. It hurts all consumers. So a People's Party would repeal the carbon tax and give and ensure that the provinces are able to handle that jurisdiction. Additionally, we would reduce the farm tax from, I believe it's 15% to 10%, and I don't have the paper in front of me, so I don't have all of the exact specific cuts, but we do have a policy that speaks to that specifically. And as well, the decreasing the inclusion rate from 50 to 0 helps, again, anyone who's in business, et cetera, and farmers are included in that category. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
It's so important that we invest in broadband infrastructure for our rural communities. We need to make sure people in rural areas are connected and that they can access information at the rates that the rest of us have come to just expect. Precision agriculture is a way that we can address weed control without using pesticides, and they need better technology in our rural areas. We need more local food production and processing. This is connecting people in communities so that they can actually have vibrant communities in our rural areas, and making sure that people can live out in the country in ways that are where they're not cut off. So it's really important we invest in infrastructure for our rural communities.
Thank you. Lloyd.
In a minute or less, right? Looking at the rural challenges, broadband being one, and locally working with the SWIFT network, with the province and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to try to get the proper investment in broadband technology so that we can reach the rural areas to support manufacturing, to support home-based businesses, to support jobs on the farm. Looking at short-line manufacturing as a key opportunity in rural Canada to be able to make farm equipment near the farm. And also, a really interesting pilot that we've run successfully is in Atlantic Canada for immigration. I was with Ahmed Hussein, who was the minister last Parliament, was on the streets of Guelph with me today knocking on doors, and he was talking about how the retention of people coming to Canada as immigrants into rural areas is higher than retention in urban areas. So bringing the right people, getting the right infrastructure in place.
Thank you. Next question. What measures will your government take to protect and expand trade opportunities across provinces and territories, as well as trade opportunities abroad? We're starting with Aisha.
When considering international trade, we must ensure foreign investment protection agreements, or FIPAs, are not a threat to our local government and sovereignty. FIPAs allow multinationals to sue local and federal governments for policy changes that result in fewer profits. There is danger here. For example, Nestle could sue Canada for single-use plastic bans if it were to affect the profits. There are two routes that Nestle could take to sue the Canadian government. One is through their American subsidiary, under the new NAFTA. And right now, NAFTA 2 does not have a FIPA, which is great. But the American Congress is talking about renegotiating NAFTA, so the door might actually reopen. Nestle could also come after us through Switzerland headquarters under the Canada's trade agreement with the European Union. Basically, what I'm saying is that we need to ensure that we protect our public goods, we protect our workers, and we protect our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. We will continue to work closely with our allies and maintain peaceful international order, but we will not get involved in foreign conflicts unless we have a compelling strategic interest in doing so. We'll prioritize relations with our main trading and defense partner, and work with whoever occupies the White House to reinforce our friendship and cooperation. We will appoint a Minister of Internal Trade whose sole responsibility will be to conduct studies, raise public awareness, and counteract the influence of special interests that benefit from interprovincial barriers and put pressure on provincial governments to get rid of them. So my government, or People's Party government, wants to make it so that you can be certified within Ontario as a nurse and work anywhere in Canada, or have a product made in Ontario and have it certified across Canada. We don't want interprovincial trade barriers. We want free trade. This is one country. It should behave that way. And we want to strengthen our international trading ties.
Thank you. Steve.
Our trade policy has been focused on exporting carbon, and it's made us really vulnerable. In the next 10 years, there's a $26 trillion clean tech opportunity. Canada needs to position ourselves so that we are leading the way in clean energy technology. We need to take real action to address climate change. There's going to be all kinds of manufacturing opportunities as we participate in this, high-tech opportunities. We need to make sure that Canada's ability to produce clean energy puts our manufacturing industries in a position so that we can actually compete really well in a low-carbon economy of the future. And we also need to renegotiate the foreign investment protection agreements. They are destroying our ability to protect Canada and Canada's environment and our municipalities. Canada has never actually come out ahead in any one of these agreements.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd.
Thank you. This is a question that I remember being president of the Guelph Chamber of Commerce at the national conference, saying we need to remove interprovincial barriers to trade. When we moved here from Manitoba in 1992, I was a certified engineering technologist in Manitoba. When I came to Ontario, I had to recertify. We can move people now between Canada and Europe, or Canada and the United States, or Canada and Asia with all of our trade agreements. The certifications follow them. But when they move from Manitoba to Ontario, they don't. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. I sit on the industry committee for Canada, or I have sat on the industry committee, and we're now looking at how do we simplify regulations and reduce the interprovincial barriers that really give Canadians a disadvantage against Canadians, and try and make it easier for business to do business across Canada.
Thank you. Ashish.
Yeah, the interprovincial barriers and our trade abroad. I think a simple answer to that may be if we change our Prime Minister. That being said, I think we have to really, as far as our trade with international countries is concerned, Canada has to play a very vital role in the sense that we have to deal with these countries with strength. And our Prime Minister is not dealing with these countries with strength. We are always dealing with China or any other country, for example, India, from a position of weakness. And if your Prime Minister is not respected, I think the countries will find it difficult to do trade with you. And similarly, I think interprovincial trade, it depends upon the federal government as well. We don't have, with the premiers are not having good relations with the federal government, that thing also get affected. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Ashish. Just going to pause for a moment. Thank you. We'll resume and on to the next question. What steps will you take to create an environment that is attractive to investors and innovators, both abroad and at home? Starting with Mark.
A simplified tax system will bring investment into the country. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my sheet here. It tells me about.
Yeah, Amanda, will you restart the time? I'm going to re-ask the question also.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. What steps will you take to create an environment that is attractive to investors and to innovators, both abroad and at home? Mark.
Thank you, and thank you for resetting the time and giving me a chance to collect my notes. Over the course of one mandate, we will gradually abolish the personal capital gains tax by decreasing the inclusion rate from 50% down to 0%. That just gives businesses more money to invest in themselves. It encourages investment in Canadian businesses rather than giving half of your profits over as taxes. You can use those profits to reinvest in your business. And I think that makes sense. Also, a lot of the tax reforms that we're proposing are specifically for businesses. One includes eliminate all corporate subsidies and other inefficient government interventions that unfairly support some companies or business sectors. This will give a savings for the Canadian government and make it a fair market to enter. We will gradually reduce the corporate income tax rate from 15 down to 10%, and that will save $9.5 billion, allowing them to invest in themselves. Thank you.
Mark. Steve.
We need to have. There he goes. Okay. We need to have a forward-looking economy. If we have an economy that people can see, it's actually going to be an economy that's going to be expanding, and this is a clean energy economy. We need to quickly move away from a carbon-based economy to a clean energy economy. This is where there's opportunities for investment, a $26 trillion global opportunity. This is also going to create millions and millions of jobs. The Green Party is going to invest $10 billion to make sure that we have the skilled trades and the university-educated people. We're eliminating tuition for the trades and colleges. It's so important that we have educated people ready to work, and I'll leave it there.
Lloyd.
We've had a great 4 years of incoming investment in Canada. We're leading the G7. And how does that happen? We have the lowest marginal effective tax rate in the G7, 13.8%. We're well below the United States. We're well below our comparators in Europe. And our economy is doing well. And we've got high-skilled workers. And we've got people moving to Canada. Some of the best talent in the world comes to Canada. So we have created an atmosphere now where Canada's a go-to place for investment. We have a reverse technology drain coming back from California. We have researchers at the University of Guelph that have repatriated or have brought their colleagues with them to Canada because research is now being funded in Canada again. So when we look at the jobs of the future, in net zero jobs, 50% tax reduction for businesses that are creating net zero solutions. So we need to keep investing in Canadians and Canada, and people will invest in us.
Thank you. Ashish?
Yeah, we have to make our country and the markets very...
Ashish, sorry, your microphone.
Okay, we have to keep our country, the business scenario very optimistic and I should say very competitive in the way that we can be a global superpower in innovation. And if we make the environment friendly to businesses, and that only happens if we if we make sure that the competitive environment is maintained through lowering of taxes, not going ahead in burdening the businesses with carbon tax, because if the industries find it more profitable to do business in India and China because of high tax burden in Canada, they will leave this place and they will not come here. So we have to make sure that the competitive environment is maintained through lower taxes, lower red tape, and lower regulations.
Thank you. Aisha.
Basically, what we need to do is we need to make life more affordable for Canadians. That means the NDP is entirely committed to do that, and we're doing that by introducing pharmacare for all. This is going to be paid by the very first time ever a wealth tax the wealth tax will apply to people that have an accumulated wealth of 20 million or more. We're going to be asking them to pay an additional 1%. We're also going to be introducing affordable housing, which is 500,000 new units, and we're going to be addressing we're going to be doing climate action, addressing the global warming by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies that equates to $3.3 billion. So if we can make life affordable for Canadian manufacturing and Canadian infrastructure, that's how we're going to be supporting people.
Thank you. Next question. If elected, how will your party work with provinces and territories to recognize Indigenous rights? Starting with Steve.
This is something that I'm very excited about. The Green Party wants to develop a Council of Canadian Governments where we would have federal, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous First Nations, Métis, Inuit representation having equal seat at the table. We see that our political process is very polarized. We see that the ability of our governments to move forward with the infrastructure projects that we need, like simple things like getting clean water to First Nations people, we're not being effective. We see that our federal governments are at odds with our provincial governments. This council that would bring Indigenous wisdom on an equal footing with provincial and federal seats and municipal seats will actually address the dysfunction that we've been experiencing in Canada.
Thank you. Lloyd.
You've seen in the last 4 years that the federal government has now been reconvening the premiers, reconvening the ministers from across Canada, and including Indigenous people in those meetings that we're having. There are blockage points, and Grassy Narrows being one of them, where the federal government wants to invest in the community and the provincial government has some jurisdiction over healthcare, investment, and we're having trouble trying to negotiate with the provincial government. But we need to continue to work together to bring the governments of Canada on a common focus that's not partisan, whether it's climate change that we're working on, Indigenous rights. And climate change is hitting Indigenous populations harder than any other population in Canada. So it's important that we solve climate change issues together with clean energy. The clean energy projects that we're running with new power lines going into northern Ontario. We need to continue that type of work that includes Indigenous people working with us.
Thank you. Ashish?
The Conservative Party does support the reconciliation with the Indigenous people, so that goes on to say that we want to share our Canadian prosperity with everyone, and we do want to make some measurable contributions to the Indigenous people by investing on their healthcare systems and education, and also clean drinking water. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Aisha?
I love Jagmeet's messaging on Grassy Narrows last week. He really showed us how committed he is to turning the tables on environmental racism. But let's not forget, Grassy Narrows and water are not the only injustices suffered by Indigenous people. That's housing, there's housing, education, medical facilities, environmental protections, and wage gap. The list goes on. These are things that the Liberals and Conservatives have shown willingness to fight Indigenous people on in court. But the NDP is committed to resolving all of these injustices because it's the right thing to do. There's a large Indigenous population in Guelph, and to this day, Indigenous people in Guelph are disproportionately affected by homelessness. Housing is a big issue for Indigenous people in this community. And what we need to do is we need to invest because money will solve these issues and commitment to Indigenous people and their rights. Canada needs to also help with resistance against resources, extraction companies, and workers' camps. Thanks.
Thank you, Aisha. Mark?
On the day that this platform plank was released, Jody Wilson-Raybould released a book, and I read an interview with her in the newspaper, and she was talking about how the Indian Act needed reform or repeal, or individual Native bands or individual Native people needed the option to remove themselves from that act. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if it was a coordinated effort to put this out at the same time as the book was released, but I'll take it. So a People's Party government will explore options to replace the Indian Act, which keeps Aboriginals in a state of dependency and allows the federal government to control most aspects of their lives, with a new legal framework that guarantees equal rights and responsibilities to Aboriginal people as Canadians and promotes the self-reliance of communities. A People's Party government will respect the Constitution and treaties. It will reaffirm the federal government's power to approve natural resources and infrastructure projects after adequate consultations with affected Aboriginal groups in partnership with them to ensure that they can benefit from these economic opportunities, as had been the case previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. 1 minute for rebuttal, Lloyd.
Yes, thank you to Aisha as well for continuing the discussion on how we need to invest in Indigenous peoples. And our government's invested $21.4 billion in Indigenous peoples' needs, including new schools, 13 new schools that have been established, working on drinking water. And I've been personally involved with Indigenous communities as a water champion, visiting to remove boiled water advisories, 87 removed, 56 yet to go, and by March 2021, I hope to be in Parliament when we can say they're all gone. Looking at 240,000 requests under Jordan's Principle for health, social, and educational services, and working with the provinces and territories to be able to deliver those services. Increasing housing units, 16,000 housing units on Indigenous communities, 52 mental wellness teams serving 344 First Nations communities. There is still a long way to go, but we've come a long way in the last 4 years.
Thank you, Lloyd. Next question. How will you ensure federal programs and interactions with business align with and respect small business realities? Starting with Lloyd.
Love small business. I had a small business in Winnipeg. I continue to have small businesses here. I was co-founder of Innovation Guelph. I was on the board of the Business Enterprise Center. So this is the question. Small businesses are different from Linamar. They don't have people to access funding and services and provide grant applications. We've created a free app, a Canada Business app, where small business can access talent retention and recruitment tools. They can access links to government services. We have a minister of small business now, haven't had one of those before, recognizing that there is a difference in small business and we need to be able to provide the unique services to small businesses whose owners are the accountants and the plumber and the HR department and the person that's providing solutions for their customers. So 95% of the businesses in Canada are small businesses, and it's really important to work with the Chamber of Commerce and others to support them.
Thank you, Lloyd. And if you don't mind grabbing your rebuttal
We
card.
all know that the small businesses are under a lot of duress and stress under the current liberal government because of the higher taxes. Okay, the new Conservative government will repeal Trudeau's tax increases on small business investments, expand spouses from Trudeau's tax increases on small businesses dividends, make it easier to navigate Canada's tax system and the Canada Revenue Agency, okay, and also reduce federal regulations by 25%, and assign a minister reporting directly to the Prime Minister to lead red tape reduction efforts. Okay, and also mandate that ministers and regulators are to support innovation, economic growth, and global competitiveness. And we will champion Canada's small businesses to the world.
Thank you, Ashish. Aisha.
We're committed to supporting people, and if they want to venture into a small business, then we will support them in whatever way possible. We're going to be protecting workers and workers' rights, and making sure that if they have pensions, those pensions are protected, and that they're not defaulted through bankruptcies, that they shouldn't be the last ones to be paid, that they should be one of the top ones to be paid because they've been committed to that company and organization. We would be fighting for workers to have the opportunity to have the ability to organize, because we know that when there are unions, there are better paying jobs with benefits, and it's better for social economic benefits as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you. I worked union, and the last 15 years of my work, most of my adult career was union. I was a union steward, and for the last 5 years, I've been working in small business. And neither time, working union or small business, did I appreciate the mega corporations getting taxpayer dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars going to the likes of Canadian Solar, which is a multinational corporation, or Toyota or Loblaws. These are major corporations, multinational corporations that have tax havens all over the world, and we're giving them tax dollars? That's incredibly insulting to the small mom and pop shop that doesn't have access to people to talk to the government for them or lobby the government for them. That's inappropriate. And I think that having an equal playing field for all businesses where the government doesn't pick winners and losers is better for everyone. The carbon tax makes everything more expensive for everyone, and it doesn't reduce emissions at all. And so that is another factor for giving small businesses their money back.
Thank you, Mark. Steve?
I'm a small business owner, and my wife's a small business owner. The Green Party is the party that supports small businesses. We are not planning to increase the tax rate for small businesses. They are so important in our community to be vibrant. They're the foundation for innovation and creating an economy of the future. The Greens will be investing in our colleges and our universities so that we have the skilled trades that people need. We'll also be providing zero-interest loans for homeowners and businesses so that they can invest in energy upgrades. This is going to create 1.4 million jobs in our communities, skilled trades jobs, as we reduce the carbon emissions from our homes and make them way more energy efficient. It's going to provide stability. This is not about government programs. Small businesses don't like government programs that they have to apply for and that run out. These programs actually create instability.
Thank you, Steve. 1 minute rebuttal. Lloyd?
Thank you, and this is to my colleague to the left, Ashish. The mentioning of the Liberal government and the red tape reduction that Harper had talked about doing but never really got to. When we looked at the industry committee, and the last motion I made at the industry committee was for us to look at regulations and how do we streamline regulations for small business. You can go on openparliament.ca, look me up, look at small business regulation, and you'll see everything that we talked about in that committee. The Treasury Board is now using a sandbox solution where they're bringing small business together with regulators to say, how can we make life easier for you? How can we make a program where you only have to answer the question once with the federal government in terms of your address. Once your business number is put in, you don't have to fill in all these fields. So trying to help businesses manage their business versus report to the federal government is something that we're actively engaged with the federal government and in the industry committee.
Thank you, Lloyd. Moving on to the next question. What is your stance on a national pharmacare program? Starting with Ashish.
The Conservative government understands that we have to make sure that some of the people are really not able to afford drugs. So we will take into consideration in the future regulations that the medicines are more affordable. At the same time, we also realize that 98% of Canadians have some form of pharmacare.
Thank you, Ashish. Aisha?
I'm personally very passionate about pharmacare. In fact, I have been advocating for pharmacare for a few years now. I went over to see Lloyd myself in Ottawa when I was lobbying with the Canadian Labour Congress. Pharmacare is extremely essential. We cannot afford to continue having cuts in our Healthcare Act, so we must strengthen it. And we need to introduce pharmacare. People are unable to afford their medications. Many people are working part-time jobs without benefits, and it's about time that we have pharmacare. It will actually save lots of money in our healthcare system. Currently, we are wasting $14,000 per minute per day in the absence of pharmacare. It is essential, and people are dying from one single illness because they don't have pharmacare. People are telling me at the doors that they're unable to afford their medications and having to make very difficult choices. So we're committed to pharmacare.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you. We have hallway healthcare in Ontario. We have a situation where we can't hold our governments accountable. We have a situation where diabetics can't get needles covered, but drug addicts can. And I think that that's strange. I think that that's a weird situation to be in, because when we talk about taking care of everybody, everybody's not being taken care of currently. We have a system that is broken, and people asking to lay on top of it even more expectations with the federal government, whose jurisdiction this is not, weighing in. I think that's inappropriate. And so my government, a People's Party government, will give the provinces $40 billion and the GST and the power to tax. So if you want pharmacare, absolutely demand it. As the constituents in Guelph, demand it and say to the provincial government, we will get it. If it's not you, it'll be the next provincial government. I want accountability in our politics, and I want the levels of government acting within their jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve.
According to the Hoskins report, there's a $5 billion savings available for Canadians if we move forward with pharmacare. It's really important that we do move forward. There's the United States, Switzerland, and then Canada is the third most expensive country in the world for medications. Having a single desk purchaser of pharmacare medicines would be a way to address this. Where was I going here? Corporate interests are one of the reasons why we haven't been able to move forward with pharmacare. It's our government is actually so vulnerable to being run by big business. The Green Party has put in 23 of our key election promises to be audited by the Parliamentary Budget Office. We wish that all the parties would have that level of transparency to say how they're going to pay for their promises.
Thank you. Lloyd.
We are on the way, and the Eric Hoskins report has been tabled with parliamentarians, and the bureaucracy is working on the implementation. The first thing that was done was to look at the high-cost drugs, the rare disease drugs, and those have been implemented with the formularies across Canada, so that people in Guelph that I've talked to in my office that had trouble accessing drugs now have the benefit and have called me back to say thank you for that. But beyond that, getting a purchase of drugs from across Canada, saving billions in dollars, was implemented over the summertime, so that we have a bulk purchasing that's being implemented. But what about tying it all together? And we need to work with the Canada Drug Agency, an agency that's being tasked with this job, to look at all the complications, because provinces and territories are the main providers of pharma. So we have to work together with them through the Canada Drug Agency.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'll give Aisha a minute. Rebuttal.
Thank you. Steve, I appreciate you mentioning Dr. Hoskins and his report. And just recently, he announced that the NDP's platform for pharmacare, or response to the need for pharmacare, is actually most aligned with the recommendations that they have enlisted. Pharmacare is going to be initiated in 2020, and we are going to completely fund this with the new wealth tax. And it is a dire need for our citizens to ensure that they have the ability and the power to look after themselves. It's going to save us lots of money, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. What is your government going to do about the increasing income inequality in Canada and the rising household debt? Starting with Aisha.
We understand how difficult it is for people to be able to afford not only housing, but all sorts of other living costs that are associated. We are committed, and we are in this for you. We are speaking for those people that don't have a voice. We are bringing in 500,000 new housing units to help with the housing crisis. We are also going to be, I can also talk about universal childcare. We recognize that we don't have enough childcare spots available, and not only that, people are having a great difficulty for affordability with with childcare. We are committed to investing $10 billion and opening 500,000 spots within the next 4 years. We're committed to ensuring that people can afford.
Thank you. Mark.
Microphone. We have a lot of policies that touch on this. One that I haven't highlighted is inflation directly increases the cost of living. Currently, the Government of Canada inflation target is 2%, 1 to 3%. And the PPC, the People's Party, will reduce that rate to 0%. We'll instruct the Government of Canada to reduce that to 0. We can't turn back time and make everything cheaper, but we can allow people time to catch up and grow into it. Additionally, the carbon tax hurts the poorest of us, and so we will repeal that. Supply management makes milk and dairy, eggs and poultry very expensive, and so we will help those farmers transition into an open free market where they can make more money and it can reduce prices for the poorest Canadians, for consumers, putting money back in your pocket for your family. And that's important for moving forward, because your taxes shouldn't be eaten up by, or your money shouldn't be eaten up by taxes.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Steve.
Earlier, I talked about an independent tax commission that's going to look at Canada's tax system to make sure it's more progressive. We need to address inequality. With artificial intelligence coming, we are going to need to move forward towards a guaranteed livable income for everyone. Our economy is changing quickly, and we need to respond to the changes that we're looking at. The Greens are going to move forward with funding affordable housing, pharmacare, dental care, and childcare. And as I mentioned earlier, we have submitted our promises to the Parliamentary Budget Office to be audited. We have a plan to pay for these important income inequity issues. And we're also going to balance the budget in 5 years. It's really important that as we address climate change, we don't do this on the backs of future generations.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd.
We've heard from Steve about some independent commissions a couple of times. In a previous debate, we heard about Tory or a climate cabinet, in which maybe the Tories and the PPC would be in a climate cabinet, having heard tonight that they want to abolish climate actions that we're taking. Is it more important for the Greens to have nonpartisanship or effective action? When we have these independent bodies where we're not debating in Parliament, there's a problem. And the problem with income inequality is that we have to debate those in Parliament. The top 1% has been, we've increased the taxes on the top 1%, reduced the taxes on the middle class, and we're making families have relief through the Canada Child Benefit, which is the most important benefit that we've put together since Medicare.
Thank you, Lloyd. Ashish.
Okay, so as far as income... Okay. So as far as income inequality is concerned, I feel the people should be provided opportunities to move ahead in life. And those opportunities can come in the form of small businesses or innovation. And the government should provide a platform and the environment where people are able to innovate and move ahead in life, in the sense that we should have lower taxes and more incentives for people and to move to have businesses or have a successful business or innovation or to move ahead in life. That's it.
Thank you, Ashish. 1 minute for rebuttal. Steve.
I want to thank Lloyd for speaking about the Green Party plan of having an inner cabinet that would be addressing the climate emergency. Climate change has been a political football. How could it be that we find ourselves having a 16-year-old calling us to account to take real climate action? This should be a nonpartisan issue. We should all be working forward on this, and we actually have solutions on all sides of the political spectrum that want to move forward with this. I want to address the carbon pricing system. It's really important that each citizen is receiving a carbon check. This will protect low-income people so that they will be able to afford the food, transportation, and be able to heat their house as the price on carbon increases. It's really important that we aren't giving the biggest carbon checks to the biggest corporate carbon emitters.
Thank you, Steve. 1 minute, Mark.
Thank you. A People's Party government would repeal a carbon tax because it doesn't reduce carbon emissions. I have in front of me, and I can show you the link, and I have resources on my website, ppcguelph.com. This is from the National Inventory Report, 1990 to 2016, Greenhouse Gas Sources and Sinks in Canada. It's the Government of Canada report. In 2005, the greenhouse gases in Ontario were 204.7 GHG tons, etc. There's lots of zeros. In 2012, the tonnage was 1.691. In 2016, it was 160.6, a reduction of 22% since 2005. BC in 2005 was 63.3, in 2012 was 60.3, and in 2016 was 60.1, a reduction of 5.1%. In Ontario, there was no tax. In BC, there was an expensive tax. It did not work. Oh.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. If your government ends up in a surplus, how would you like to see the funds spent? Starting with Mark.
I personally would love to see small businesses reinvest in themselves. I would love to see individuals purchase houses or increase their savings, invest in their children's future, invest in their own short-term or long-term future. That is what you're supposed to do with your money. It is your money. And with a surplus, the People's Party government will reinvest in Canada and reinvest in us, just like we should be doing, responsibly. Once our deficit is hit balance, then we can start to reduce taxes, and we can let the population, the constituents, you, taxpayers, keep more of your money and do with it what you know your family needs. Because some people need to save, and some people need to spend, and some businesses need to save, and some businesses need to spend. It is not up to the government to give big checks to who they deem is needy. It is up to you to do what you wish with your money. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I would like to see Canada move towards a guaranteed livable income. It's so important that people who have disabilities, our seniors, people who are struggling with mental health issues or addictions, that they have a place to live, that they know that they can afford their next meal. Our society is changing quickly. With automation and in artificial intelligence, we can expect to have job losses in our manufacturing sectors, and we can expect jobs like driving taxis and such to be lost. So we need to be thinking about how we can make sure that we have an economy that's looking forward to the future. Number one, we need to make sure we have a plan to balance the budget. And I'm so proud that the Green Party has actually done this transparently, put forward a plan that we are not going to be leaving our future generations with debt that they're going to have to pay off.
Thank you. Lloyd?
Last chamber debate that I was involved with when I was running for office, I said that when you have an economy that works for the middle class, you have a country that works for everyone. To create good-paying jobs and improve the lives of Canadians, now is the time to invest, not later. And that's still true. Investing in Canadians is what's brought 900,000 people out of poverty, created 1 million jobs, creating a debt-to-GDP ratio that continues to go down. And that's the balance sheet number that we look at. Businesses look at return on investments. Countries look at, when you're investing in the country, are you getting growth? Are people getting out of poverty? Are you improving situations in society where people can get ahead? Are you helping with climate change initiatives, which are expensive initiatives? But we have to continue to invest in Canadians.
Thank you. Ashish?
Okay. Okay, so we know that surplus is not going to be there for the next 4 years. I just quickly jotted down the points. If I have more money, what am I going to do? I'll invest on homelessness, healthcare, education, and make sure that teachers are not teachers funding, and science and technology, mental health, security for the seniors, and I would and veterans specifically. I would make sure that all possible help is given to veterans and they're not ignored in our country.
Thank you. Aisha.
I would work towards eliminating homelessness and poverty and strengthen our healthcare system and our education system. I started nursing about 20 years ago, and nursing back then, or our healthcare system back then, what it is now, so much has been cut. It was about 7 years ago that there was a discussion about hallway nursing, and I thought it was the most absurd thing, because what happened to the privacy of the patient, the breach of the confidentiality around the patient? You know, I hear the Liberals talking about bringing 900,000 people out of poverty. But recently, there was a report that came out from the food bank indicating that there's actually been a rise of clients or people using the food bank. In fact, from June 2018, there was a comparison of June 2018 and June 2019, and there's actually been a 22% increase. So my question is, you know, we may have the lowest unemployment rate, but are those good paying jobs? Are those jobs that are giving people livable income?
Thank you, Aisha. 1 minute, Lloyd.
So the measure of poverty is something that we've also implemented in this Parliament, looking at the market basket of goods. Knowing that poverty is a different thing in Toronto than it is in Calgary, than it is in Guelph. The market basket of goods is the measure that we're working on to reduce poverty by 50% by 2030. And we're two years ahead of schedule on that. Our poverty reduction plan is working, and that means affordable food, affordable housing, access to medical care, pharmacare will all help us to reduce poverty in Canada.
Thank you, Lloyd. Moving on to the next question. What are your party's plans to ensure Canadians have the right skills, education, and training for businesses to be able to grow and thrive? Starting with Steve.
We need to invest in our universities and our colleges. We need the skilled trades that our manufacturing sectors need so that they can thrive and move forward in a very fast-changing economy. The Green Party is going to invest $10 billion to eliminate university tuition and college tuition and to improve the quality of our education system. We also need to provide stability. A key thing here is when a business hires a new person, we need to have stability, and the Greens are actually going to provide stability as we move forward in addressing our climate crisis. Our zero-interest loans for homes and businesses will provide stability, not these one-off programs where you can replace your windows and then that program is gone just about at the time when you've got your person trained. It's so important we have stability.
Thank you. Lloyd.
Another place where I'm so proud of what we've done. I worked on this when I was at the Chamber, trying to get skilled tradespeople in place. This past summer, we made an investment with the IBEW, and one of the members is here in the room. $5.5 million pre-apprenticeship training and retention for an innovative learning program project at Conestoga. And the IBEW Local 804 is going to be training 240 electrical trade apprentices, which is great news for Guelph businesses. They've been screaming at me for years to find electricians that can help on the factory floor. And those are good paying jobs. They're union jobs. Participants are going to have 11 weeks in the classroom training, hands-on practical learning, 17 weeks of on-the-job training. We're also incenting employers to hire apprentices so they can complete their apprenticeships. $10,000 over 4 years for businesses that want to hire people so that they can work with journeymen.
Thank you. Ashish.
The Conservative Party wants to invest in our youth, which are the future of our country, and particularly will invest on universities and colleges.
Thank you. Aisha.
I had an opportunity to actually teach a dual credit course. It was an incentive to help young folks get interested in post-secondary education. So I had an opportunity to teach anatomy and physiology to high school students, and it gave them an opportunity to get both a college credit and a high school credit. But that's not it. I mean, kids are struggling, and they're having difficulty paying the high tuition fees. And it's not only the tuition fees, it's also the affordable housing, the food costs. We are committed to ensure that there is going to be federal loans for students going towards their tuition that will be interest-free. An example, Liberals, under the Liberal government, if a student had a student loan for $27,000, if they end up, once they've paid off the debt, the interest alone would cost them $10,000. So interest-free loans, increase our student grants for children, and also work towards free tuition.
Thank you. Mark?
Currently, it's easier to hire somebody from a different country than it is to bring them across provincial lines with certifications. And so my government will make sure that that is something that is changed, something that is worked on. And we should be able to encourage and increase and move our skilled workers from Manitoba or Alberta to Ontario, or from Ontario to British Columbia or Nova Scotia. Similarly, and in a different track, our kids are currently really fragile. I've had a lot of conversations with people at the University of Guelph, and they've consistently said to me, I'm surprised at how fragile our kids are. You can't even talk to these people currently. And I said, what do you think is happening? And they're concerned with the cancel culture and free speech, and it's a really, really fraught conversation currently, and it's one that we're seeing play out in our universities. Fragile kids have a hard time fitting into the difficult workforce that we're going to be entering, and that's not healthy. We will strengthen free speech protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. 1 minute, Lloyd.
Thanks again, Aisha, for bringing up students. When we look at how do we support students when the provincial government continues to attack them, looking at the University of Guelph, how do we support students that are trying to get through programs, or Conestoga College? So in the past Parliament, we increased student grants to $3,000, but since the last cuts, we're proposing to go up to $4,200 for student assistance, giving them 2 years until they need to start payback, giving them up until $35,000 income before they start to have to pay back. And if they have children, to put that on pause for 5 years, knowing that raising children is expensive. And they get the Canada Child Benefit to help with children, and we're increasing that by 10% for children under 1 year old. So we're doing what we can to help people to get through education, to start their families, and to be successful in society.
Thank you, Lloyd. Moving on to the next question. What will you do to expedite the replacement of Canada's aging military infrastructure, such as the F-18 jets? Starting with Lloyd.
We have a strategy that we've put forward in the past Parliament. It's been a busy Parliament, let me tell you. There's a lot of files. The strong, secure, engaged strategy of increasing our military spending over a period of time and working with the local local reserve forces, the gunners, to try and help them to recruit people into the military so that we can do what we need to do to honor our NATO commitments. And also looking at what we were sending to Saudi Arabia and them not paying their bills for military equipment is now going to Canadian Armed Forces and keeping jobs in Ontario. So we are supporting our forces through investment and through training and through helping them have the equipment they need in order to be safe and to protect people around the world and to instill democracy in countries that need our support.
Thank you,
The
Ashish.
Conservative Party is committed to modernize our armed forces, and we'll do everything that is possible to make sure that we get the best and the brightest we have in the armed forces have, the best equipment they have possible in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Aisha?
We would stop providing arms to Saudi Arabia, because we know how they're using them against Yemen's. We would also ensure that people's jobs are protected here and make sure that they're good paying jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you. Under this Liberal government, we saw what happened to people who tried to do procurement for the Navy, let's say. Vice Admiral Mark Norman was in a long trial about the whole thing until it all fell apart. And, well, there was embarrassment there. But fundamentally, if we don't take care of our people and allow them to do their job, then what is the use of the infrastructure if the people can't do their job or aren't well enough to be there? So a People's Party government will enshrine in legislation the country's obligation to our veterans in a military covenant between the government and those who served in the armed forces. Just today, I saw a newspaper article talking about how the Liberal government cut a whole bunch of funding in the spring, and now hospitals are being shortchanged. And that doesn't help our military strength. That undercuts our military strength. There's no ability for the military to do their job if the people are not taken care of. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
We need to invest in the right equipment. F-35 fighter jets are not the right equipment for Canada. We need to have the ability to be present in our northern Arctic coastal areas so that we can have sovereignty over our great nation and this land that we have been gifted to protect. We need to be developing deeper relationships with our First Nations people who live up in those areas. We need to stop selling armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. This is a human rights violation, the way Saudi has been using those weapons to commit untold harm. 90,000 people murdered in Yemen. We need to invest in people in our military service, meaning that we need to invest in mental health services. To have our service people come home after being in a service and have them commit suicide is a travesty.
Thank you. 1 minute, Lloyd.
Thanks. They keep talking about our government, so I have to keep clarifying one item for Mark. When he mentioned the healthcare and the military, that article was later clarified by another article to say that the provincial government was actually the ones doing the cutting on providing health care for the military, because health care in that case was a provincial jurisdiction. And cutting health care, cutting education is something we're seeing far too much from the provincial government in Ontario, provincial government in Alberta, that even our citizens that serve our country are getting caught up in the cuts that we're seeing. So I hope to see that come back around in the next Parliament.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. How will you control the increase in regulatory burdens faced by businesses in Canada? Starting with Ashish.
I think the Conservative Party understands deeply that it is a regulatory burden and a red tape which is basically inhibiting and letting businesses reach their full potential. So we'll cut the regulatory burden by 25%, and also for every new regulation, we are going to take away 2 regulations away. That's how we are going to take care of the regulatory burden. And I stress upon the fact that for the small businesses to grow and the businesses to grow in general, the regulatory burdens have to be reduced in our country so that they remain competitive globally and also nationally.
Thank you. Aisha?
We're committed to protecting workers and workers' rights, ensuring that they have benefits and that they are well-paying jobs. NDP is committed to affordability, and we recognize that that is an issue. People are not being paid and are able to sustain an affordable standard of living. So we are committed to ensuring that people have the opportunity and are paid well with union jobs and pensions. Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. Fundamentally, a People's Party government is about reducing the red tape, reducing the bureaucracy you have to go through to do your business. I mean, an example is new building contracts, et cetera, needs to go through 3 levels of government: federal, provincial, municipal. And I mean, it's so complicated, it puts undue burden on business, right? There are so many people you have to check the boxes off. And some of the red tape is duplicated, right? The federal version and then the provincial version, et cetera. So my government is interested in getting rid of the excess, making sure that we have well-built, reliable homes, certainly nothing that is not regulated, but at the same time, having unnecessary duplication and onerous regulations doesn't make sense to small business. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
It's really important that we simplify the tax code. If you're really wealthy, you have an opportunity to engage an accountant and lawyers so you can pay less taxes. This is not actually helpful for Canada and for business and for equity in our economy. Our Council of Canadian Governments is also going to be really helpful at addressing things like the building code. Each province has its own building code, and this gets in the way of builders being able to do the right thing to reduce their carbon emissions by having homes that are net zero and really innovative solutions for using less carbon emissions in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd?
Yeah, I've mentioned this earlier in the debate that we have been studying and acting on regulatory burdens in Canada through the work of the Treasury Board. One of the purposes of government, though, is to make sure that Canadians are safe, that our food is safe, that our water is safe, our buildings are safe, and that's done through regulation. So regulatory burden is necessary in order to keep Canadians safe, but at the same time, we have to be competitive as businesses. So what we're working on through Treasury Board is to harmonize regulations across provinces and territories, to look at our trading partners and see where we can harmonize regulations between trading partners so that goods moving across borders might have similar regulations, but could be able to align themselves with some minor adjustments. And so we are working on that currently. We do have a regulatory reform group working on that in Treasury Board.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. We have a significant shortage of beds for seniors. This contributes to shortage of beds in hospitals. What are your plans to address our aging population? Starting with Aisha.
This is a true fact. We have not only a shortage of beds, but we actually have shortage of nurses and healthcare professionals. So we need to ensure that there is more funding and that our healthcare system is adequately funded. We are working towards and we're committed to a national strategy for long-term care and a national strategy for home care. It's important that we give seniors the respect and dignity that they deserve. And if they need services, we need to make sure that they have the right care by the right healthcare provider at the right time. So addressing shortages is a huge issue. And that would be it. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Currently, the healthcare system is provincial, but the federal government gives a transfer. The current system involves the provinces satisfying a series of conditions set in the Canada Health Act in exchange for transfer payments. This discourages innovation, and the money doesn't directly fund healthcare services. It is applied to the budgets or the province's budget, and then the province can dole it out however they want. So if the federal government, for example, is giving $20 billion to Ontario, I don't know what the number is, so let's just use 20 billion. Then Ontario can take that 20 billion and put it wherever they want. What my party wants to do, what my People's Party government would do is tell the government you have $40 billion, or tell the provinces you have $40 billion, and each province gets an allotment, and from that money, you have to deliver healthcare. No conditions other than delivering healthcare, and you, the taxpayer, can hold your provincial government accountable. No them saying it's the feds and the federal government saying it's them. Thank you.
Steve.
We need to build more long-term care beds. It's really clear that our population is aging and we need more facilities. We can't have our hospitals, which are the most expensive beds in our healthcare system, be taken up with people who don't have a place to go. We also want to reduce the or say it in a way, a better way, is to have our seniors stay in their homes as long as possible. Different types of personal support care workers, so people can stay in their homes. And coming up with innovative solutions that actually build community. We need to have the financing options or the options for seniors to actually come together and purchase a home where they can actually have meals brought together and have an experience of community as they age in our community, rather than sending them off somewhere. As long as possible, have them be part of our current neighborhoods.
Thank you. Lloyd.
I feel like I'm coming full circle on this. When I was at the Chamber, I sat on the quality management team at St. Joe's, looking at how do we provide care for our seniors. Federal government, now I'm switching over to the federal government. The federal government was involved at that point through Frank Valeriot as well, to see what can we do to help our seniors. The federal government can invest in space. We do have infrastructure investment opportunities now with the federal Liberal government. We can build the units that people could live in or be cared for in, but we need the people to do the caring, and that comes from the province. So working with the bilateral agreements with the provinces, that if we can help fund the facility, they need to be able to fund the operations, and that's where the rub is right now. So going forward, we need to engage with the provinces and with the healthcare funding they get. If they don't use it, they give it to FCM, and we'll deliver services another way.
Thank you. Ashish.
Yeah, I was with the senior citizens today in the morning, and I thanked them, and I had a lot of gratitude for them. I told them that the country I'm enjoying, it is because of their efforts. So I do agree with Aisha that they deserve all the respect and dignity and all the gratitude from our side. That being said, there should be increased funding for infrastructure, and also the facilities for long-term care must be enhanced and must be brought into picture. Yeah.
Thank you. We're moving to the last question of the evening before closing remarks. What will you do to enhance digitization of government services to reduce administrative burdens on business? We'll be starting with Mark.
Well, this is kind of a very specific question. The People's Party doesn't have a specific policy plank talking about digitization of the current services. That's kind of my wheelhouse. I design e-commerce sites and I design the systems that work with it. So it's in my wheelhouse. I'm interested in doing that, but we don't have a standing policy for that. So currently, I would be interested in hearing the deficiencies in the current system and how it can be fixed. But I apologize. I don't have a robust answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Steve.
For us to digitize our services, we need to make sure that rural communities can equally access them. So we need to invest in broadband infrastructure for rural communities. We need to invest in our universities so that we have the technology to actually digitize our health records as well as the service applications for Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Lloyd.
Thank you. I mentioned this earlier, the new app that we've delivered, Canada Business, free download, finding permits and licenses, importing and exporting, protecting my ideas, hiring and managing employees, is all government services that are now available digitally. So I chaired the Innovation and Digital Caucus, and we did a lot of work in this area, working with the Minister of Everything, Navdeep Bains, and his group, so that we could provide small business those types of services. Another one that's in our platform is online payroll, which would be a voluntary service, but to be able to put payroll records online through a government service so that all the deductions are done through the government service where they're going to be ending up anyway. It's a voluntary service that we've got in our platform. Payroll is one of the most difficult things for small businesses to manage properly, and that's now going to be put forward in the next Parliament with a Liberal government.
Thank you. Ashish.
Yeah, as far as the digitization is concerned, the Conservative Party takes cybersecurity actually very seriously, and we do want to develop Canadian technologies for Canadian needs.
Thank you. Aisha.
Thanks. I've been involved within our healthcare system going paperless in our hospitals. And so that is a good form of digitalization or moving towards digitalization. And the problems that arise is the lack of training, the lack of support, and then the unexpected hurdles or costs that come up. And part of it is because you don't have workers sitting at that same table when those decisions are being made, because we know what are some of those hurdles and obstacles, and we can help in the decision-making process and making it seamless. So going digital is great, but I think most importantly, we need to ensure that workers are supported, workers are properly trained, and that their needs are being met and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. We're now going into closing remarks, going in reverse order, starting with Ashish.
Okay, thank you again to the organizers of this debate, and thank you to the other candidates for stepping up forward as I have. As we approach Election Day, we also approach Remembrance Day and the sacrifices that were made for us to be a free society with open and fair elections. I honor those sacrifices, and I honor your vote. We all recognize that the Liberal government Canadians elected in 2015 proved to be quite different than what it was packaged to be. We all can have an honest understanding that we cannot expect to have better government or recover from the weakness and failures if we re-elect Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister. We must reject the Liberal carbon tax scheme and choose a better way, one that also makes everyday living more affordable. We need to trust and support and have confidence in Canadians to make their own good decisions. And we must bring a Canadian creativity and innovation to the world. And we must encourage consumer and market-driven solutions for our businesses, both big and small. Thank you again to all who are here tonight, and thank you those who are watching this debate online. It would be a privilege to represent you as your next Member of Parliament in Ottawa. Please vote Ashish Sachan.
Thank you. Lloyd.
One thing that's been a mission for me is to know every bit about our community. I've had a great time learning about Guelph, learning about Guelphites, what makes them tick, how good people are in Guelph, how Guelphites want to create a better world. It's such an honor to bring them together and then watch them do their thing. Last week we had a debate on the environment where the question really was, what are we going to do about the climate crisis? And one of the things I want to point out is that Guelph is a leader in climate solutions. I've been working with the Community Energy Initiative, for example, for about 10 years now. And Guelph's been wrestling with these issues, and I've been in the discussions. And I've been working through the Chamber of Commerce and through other not-for-profits to try and reduce our community footprint. It's really up to us to make sure that 7 generations out, people will still be able to appreciate nature. They'll still have clean water to drink. And they'll have a planet that's sustaining itself. If I have an opportunity to draw on the strengths of our community to make these amazing things happen through the work of other people and the university, I just don't want to miss that opportunity. We have it in front of us. People are trying to figure out who they're going to choose on the ballot. But if they choose me again, they're going to see a community building exercise here in Guelph. A community exercise across Canada where we bring all parties together to build a community across Canada that cares about climate, environment, and social.
Thank you, Lloyd. Steve.
Greens are about economics, ethical economics, non-exploitive economics, economics that work for hardworking Canadians, economics that provide opportunities for Canadian businesses that put people and planet first. Our plan has been independently costed, and we've received a passing grade. The Parliamentary Budget Office says that what we propose to do is transparent and realistic. The Liberals have chose to withhold their costing analysis. They're not even planning to balance the budget. We will. We need honesty in government. Because we are about economics, I can tell you that there is no business case for this pipeline. The Liberals or the Conservative candidates won't tell you that, but I will. I encourage you to take the time to visit our website and read our platform. I think you'll appreciate the depth and breadth of the Green Plan, how we do politics differently. And I hope that on Election Day, you'll place your trust in me and in the Green Party. Just a handful of elected Green MPs can hold the balance of responsibility, hold government to account, to ensure that the environment, in every meaning of the word, stays at the top of the agenda. Simply voting Green is your best choice.
Mark.
Well, thank you very much to the Guelph District Real Estate Board. Thank you for the moderator. Thank you to my other fellow candidates. This has been a lot of fun. The federal government's job is to responsibly manage our resources and create a situation where the provinces and the municipalities can plan to service the incoming population. Predictable, right? When too many people arrive in the municipalities or the provinces, they can become overwhelmed. That's what we're seeing right now all over Canada. We have a federal government who's continually telling us that we need to keep increasing the population, but we don't have the infrastructure to keep up. From housing, hospitals, road capacity, they're all falling behind. The solution is not more people. It's responsible management of our borders and systems. That includes the immigration system. Fundamentally, I want to see Canada do well, because when Canada does well, Canadians do well. We all do well. A federal government's job is not to provide you health care or provide you services. That's a province's job. A federal government's job is not to make sure you succeed. That's your job. It's the federal government's job to set the right conditions, to make sure that the table is set and that there are opportunities so that when you choose to engage with those opportunities, you can be successful, but it's your choice. We're going to make sure you can move your skills across the country and work as whatever skilled trade you've trained at anywhere across Canada. I can't, and the federal government can't possibly do everything for every citizen of every province, because that's their jobs. It's not the federal government's job. Their job is to make sure, the federal government's job is to make sure the provinces can deliver their services.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for organizing this debate, and I want to thank all the other candidates that have attended, and most importantly, I want to thank you all for coming and being active in the democratic process. I'm a mental health nurse, and it's a real tough job. I want people to know how political my work is. Working on the front line of the healthcare system means I see a lot of people who our systems have failed. Whether it's a person whose addiction was treated as a crime instead of an illness, or the Indigenous mother whose children have been taken away from her, or the young person who doesn't want to have kids because they're not sure where the future will lie with the climate crisis. The one responsibility of a nurse is to protect the public, and that's why I have decided to run. I want to give hope to all those people on the margins, hope that they will have a representative in government who can listen to them no matter where they're coming from. I want people to know I'm committed to working with the NDP to make life in Canada livable again. As a healthcare advocate, it was clear to me that the NDP's platform was miles ahead of all the others. I was inspired by the NDP's commitment to bring in much-needed expansions to our healthcare services. But more than that, it offered a way forward for Canadians who were truly struggling with affordability today and anxiety about what tomorrow and the future will hold.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our debate. I would like to thank the Guelph and District Association of Realtors for co-hosting with us, Guelph City Hall for allowing us to host our debate here, Rogers TV for filming, and Chamber staff and volunteers for making this debate possible. Thank you to the audience who joined us. I'd also like to thank all the candidates for your passion and your desire to serve our community. A reminder to everyone that advance polls are open this weekend. Election Day is October 21st. Please don't forget.